Uh, Good afternoon to everybody. We are in the session that discusses avionics system design and requirements for the design of a more robust aircraft avionics system, considering multitude of aspects, which all get initiated with identifying the mission that primarily the specific aircraft needs to serve. Okay, so if you will have the end user provide that particular input, you can have the first level of understanding on what all avionics systems, which are electronics assisted by software in its various forms that needs to occupy the aircraft in order to render it effective to carry out the mission. Okay, so we had seen the example of a particular aircraft, which is the ground attack version of the A-10, and several parameters as part of the definition of the phases of the mission are all identified here, such as takeoff, landing, cruise phase, attack phase, and so on. So in this particular case, in addition to the aircraft having a requirement to travel a certain distance, it will need to also perform a certain role somewhere along the middle section of that phase, okay, which means you have additional specialized phases which are identified to more commonplace types of aircraft phases. So in a passenger carrying aircraft or a transport aircraft, you have a very straightforward definition of the concept of the phase. Okay, so the aircraft taxis on the ground, gains speed and takes off, ascends, reaches a certain altitude, retains that altitude until it reaches somewhere in the neighborhood of its destination, after which the reverse task is attempted and the aircraft once more reaches the runway and lands and gets to a terminal where people and cargo can be offloaded. So that's not the case here. All those aspects would certainly also have additionally some very specific phases, which are when the aircraft primarily carries out its mission. Okay, if it's a ground attack version, you will have some important attributes that the avionics needs to also support, such as its ability to target various potential hostile regions on the ground, make use of the onboard weapon systems to carry out destructive aspects or neutralize the various targets, keep a close watch over how many of various types of weapons are there on board, because if it runs out of any of them, that is an indication that the aircraft needs to come back and reload. Okay, so in a similar manner, the use of fuel on board the aircraft is also a critical resource. Then the potential that the aircraft suffers damages as it draws fire from the ground, especially because it is in a hostile territory. Lot of targeting of this particular aircraft does take place. So to what extent will it be able to withstand all this? So I told you about the concept of housekeeping. So the integrity of the airplane is again monitored, because the pilot can't be doing that while also flying the airplane. So there are automated schemes which will inform about the extent of damage or the usability of the particular aircraft. So before it gets quite serious in terms of the damages that it has received, it will need to land in a friendly region where some amount of repair and replacements can be carried out. Okay, so these are aspects which are governed by the actual electronics that automates the overall process of carrying out a particular mission. Okay, now what we shall do is look at the typical aircraft itself. So it is the ground attack version of the aircraft. It carries infrared guided missiles, the so-called Stinger, okay, missile system. And it can also carry radar guided missiles like the Sidewinder type of missile systems. So it is robustly protected by armor plating, and right in the front you also have a rotating turret type of gun, such as a Gatling gun equivalent, which is able to fire several rounds per minute and literally pulverize the hostile targets by shredding it in pieces. Okay, so that kind of a weapons system is also carried by the aircraft, and it can fly close to the ground. So immaterial of how much ever of the ground attack happens, as it receives the various anti-aircraft shells from the ground, it still can manage to remain in flight. Okay, so the engines are located in a manner where they won't immediately be affected by attacks from the ground, and they have robust redundancy that is also incorporated in the aerodynamic structural aspects, so that it will remain in flight for an extended duration of time until the mission is considered as complete. Okay, so that kind of an aircraft has got certain systematic approaches that will need to be identified as part of its design, from the mission aspects all the way down to the avionics that it will need to carry. Okay, so how does one translate the requirements of a mission to the requirements of the avionics system that has to be carried on board? So this is primarily emphasized by what is called as the traceability requirement. One important aspect or a concept that is very salient when it comes to engineering systems design is the concept of traceability. Okay, so you will come across this term in multitude of circumstances, especially in the scheme of management of various projects, wherein the role of a particular resource in the eventual outcome of the activity will be closely monitored. Okay, so let's start with the top-down approach of what is called as a constructive exercise of design and development. Okay, so you have a certain user that comes to a manufacturer of an aircraft system and says that we have this sort of an aircraft requirement, which has to carry out a certain mission. So the mission could be any of what is identified here. It could be an air superiority mission. It could be a ground support or ground attack mission, or it could be a very commonplace mission such as carrying passengers or transports such as cargo and so on. Okay, so that is the primary mission and its understanding as provided by the user. From there, you are now going to break down that into various segments or phases, such as the aircraft in various locations on the ground, in the process of somewhere between the ground and the air while it is ascending or taking off, during its cruise phase, while it is trying to get back to the ground for various purposes such as maintenance, repair, replenishment of stock, and so on, and eventually when it has completely landed on the ground. Okay, from where it can in turn be taken to various locations for the carrying out of repairs and topping up. Right, so these are the various mission segments. These in turn are broken down further into functionalities of each of these segments. Okay, so you have the constant monitoring required out of certain parameters, such as how much of a barrel roll the aircraft can carry out. A maneuver which many among you here would have noticed attack aircrafts or fighter airplanes performing, it can literally roll on its sideways. Okay, the pilot will be literally along the axis of such a roll, and the aircraft flips over. So that kind of a barrel roll is a very conspicuous maneuver that some of the aircrafts can perform. Next, precision with which it can carry out navigation, which means its ability to travel along a very well-defined path of movement from a particular location to another one. Okay, so the navigation precision at every instant of time, is it maintaining its course? That is called as navigation precision. Next one is if it is going supersonic, especially true during the takeoff and the ascent, the cruise phase. In air superiority and air dominance aircrafts, you have what is called as the supersonic supercruise. Okay, an example of that is the F-22, the Raptor. So it is a supersonic supercruise aircraft. It can travel and reach certain locations at extremely high speeds compared to mainstream fighter aircrafts. Okay, consistent travel for extended durations of time at speeds exceeding Mach 1. Okay, and abilities to retain that kind of a speed for extended durations of time. That is called as Mach holding. So that is again one more aspect of functionality that is relevant to a particular segment of the mission. Okay, it is most likely during the phases where it is either taking off or cruising. So during takeoff, there will be full thrust that is expected out of the aircraft engines. It is called as an afterburner thrust. So you will see that in fighter aircrafts, the rear part of the engine glows. Okay, so that is because it is using its afterburner, which means the fuel that is already burnt is again mixed with more oxygen, and further thrust is developed out of that, because there is going to be a likelihood of unburnt fuel which can generate further thrust. So it in effect increases the efficiency in the overall performance of the engine. Okay, so that is afterburner thrust. So that can effectively contribute significant amount of forward velocity and thrust to the aircraft, in addition to the velocity that is provided by the main jet engine. Okay, so those kinds of features will enable the aircraft to climb at a much higher rate, travel at a much higher speed, even while it is taking off. Okay, and during the cruise phase or during select phases of operation where it is actually trying to get somewhere as early as possible, depending on the level of alert, if it notices that there is a hostile aircraft invading the territory, you will need to go and meet it as forward location as possible. Okay, so that it will not uh, initiate sufficient damages within the territory. So even before any of that happens, these particular aircrafts have to go and meet the hostile airplane. So which means extreme high-speed travel towards the frontier areas is expected, and supersonic speeds are generated primarily for that purpose. Okay, so that is just a functional aspect or a segment at the level of a requirement or functionality for a larger mission segment. To assist all of these various functionalities, you again will have some specific avionics systems, and requirements for such systems have to be now obtained. For example, if it is a navigation precision, you will need what is known as heading accuracy. Which way is the aircraft directed, okay, as it moves towards its destination? So that is primarily defined in terms of an angle with reference to the geometric or geographic north. Okay, so that onboard compass scheme, which is defined within the aircraft, along with magnetometers, will be assisting the pilot with understanding the angle that is maintained by the compass readings with reference to the geographic north. So that is heading accuracy. So it will need to keep to an extremely accurate and least level of offset with reference to that particular information. Then you have the concept of the weight and reliability, which can enable the aircraft to go at high speeds. So if the weight is less, certainly that will assist, or you will need to develop significant thrust in the engines in order to counter that weight. Okay, so that thrust to weight ratio has to be in favor of the aircraft to carry out certain maneuvers. And the reliability in the operation of the airplane during such exceeding speeds. That is again an aspect that is emphasized in the actual avionics system that will support such kinds of possibilities. Okay, so that is the overall top-down scheme. There is also the reverse process wherein if there had been a failure in a particular avionics system, like for example, the onboard magnetometer and compass system had failed, it will have resulted in a poor kind of understanding that the aircraft operator will have about which way the aircraft needs to travel. That means the accuracy in the precision is diluted, okay, which in turn is reflected in the actual operational phase. So the aircraft certainly will not be taking off and descending or cruising in a manner where it is originally intended to perform such an operational phase or a mission segment. That in turn will affect the overall mission itself, such as air superiority or passenger transport or so. So it will not be able to reach its destination or enforce its capabilities over the particular region of warfare that it is bound to uh, situate itself in. Okay, so that is the reverse manner in which it can also be approached. So you either have a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach. So the top-down approach is by and large identified as part of the design and development exercise. The bottom-up approach is used in scenarios where you will need to work from backwards in order to understand why there had been a failure in the mission or in the equipment itself. Okay, so if there had been a potential damage or a complete crash of the airplane, you will need to investigate from the lower levels and work your way upwards. Okay, so that fault analysis scheme is a bottom-up approach. So either way, there is a possibility to use this concept of traceability as a very efficient tool to understand the overall process of design and troubleshooting. Okay, by way of appreciating this entire idea on a very frontline fighter aircraft system or an attack aircraft that is deployed since only the last 5 to 6 years, let's look at a multi-role airplane, which is the typical mission that is identified for the aircraft, while it is even undergone a massive level of development and upgradation to accommodate various kinds of missions into a single aircraft platform. Okay, so that is the Sukhoi Su-35 multi-role fighter aircraft. Okay, so evidently what is shown here is an exploded view of the airplane, starting with the front section of the aircraft, where you will notice the presence of the phased array radar system and the antenna for that. Usually in recent times, aircraft's operating radar systems employ antennas which are called as active electronically scanned arrays, AESA. Okay, so they are beyond visual range radar systems, and they have multitudes of transmit receive modules which are helpful with creating simultaneously several fields of view so that multiple targets can be simultaneously tracked, and some of these targets can be engaged with various kinds of weapon systems. And the weapon systems that you notice here are not all carried simultaneously. Depending on the mission, you have a select numbers of these weapons which are integrated with the aircraft platform. Okay, so and you have lots of hard points onto which some of these weapons can be carried. So some of them are global positioning system, GPS guided weapons or missile systems. Some are radar guided, infrared guided systems are there, and there are also imaging guidance systems or TV guided systems. Okay, so what happens there is you have an onboard video camera, and the live information as the video camera operates at the tip of the missile is compared against another stream of video which has already been recorded and stored on board the missile memory system. So a constant match between the two is used to guide the missile to its eventual destination. Okay, so that kind of a TV guidance is also available. So you have various levels of missile systems, and these are put into operation depending on the precise phase of the particular mission. Okay, and we saw about the mission and the segments and so on. Okay, so in the case of multi-role fighters, you can have the aircraft perform roles such as surveillance and reconnaissance, which means it carries intelligence gathering devices on board while it flies at high speed through hostile territory. Because of the extreme performance that an aircraft can have, such as the Su-35, it literally cannot be caught up by any other missile system. It travels at around Mach 2.5. Okay, so no missile systems can immediately cause damage to it, considering this extreme speeds it flies at. So if the onboard cameras are completely synchronized with that kind of speed, frame upon frame of crystal clear images can be obtained, okay, of activities such as troop formation in hostile territories and various other things which will need to be monitored from close quarters. Okay, so the aircraft will fly into hostile territory, take photographs and come back. So that is one of the missions. The aircraft can be used in the interceptor role, which evidently means it will try to block invading aircrafts after reaching a particular location within its own territory at enormous speeds so that it is able to engage the enemy aircrafts as earlier as possible. Okay, so that's the interceptor role. It can invade the hostile territories in the attack mode by carrying specific kinds of missiles and execute the mission and come back without being in any manner damaged. Okay, so that is again one more mission where it is in an attack role. Another role for the aircraft is its ability to travel extended distances, which means it has a possibility to be transformed from a tactical aircraft to a strategic aircraft, also called as a bomber mission. Okay, so there are refueling systems. You can see that right in the forefront of the aircraft diagram here. So wherein it can be fueled while it is in flight so that it can travel further distances without having to come back, relying totally on its own onboard fuel systems. Okay, so it will top up as and when required and carry out the mission at exceedingly further distances away, which can at times be few thousands of kilometers away from its home base. Okay, So those aspects are clearly the requirement for refueling probes to be carried on board means you have extended types of requirements that have been identified for the avionics system, such as retracting or deploying the uh, refueling probes, making it actually connect with the refueling drogue that is carried by a tanker aircraft, and all of this needs to happen in an automated manner. Okay, so you can also see that there are various kinds of electronic warfares that can be conducted by this aircraft in its role as a spectrum warfare attack aircraft mode. Okay, so there are electronic warfare pods and jamming signals that can be generated by such an airplane, and these are wide frequency bandwidth operability criterion that are accommodated in the signal generators that the aircraft carries, and the very high powers of signals are put out either in the way where it operates as a barrage jammer, which means it puts forth a garbage type information of very high power, which can literally swamp the radar systems of hostile forces. It can also work in a manner where it takes in a sample of the radar information that is directed towards it, modifies certain parameters, and resends it back towards the radar. Okay, so that's kind of smart radar systems are also there. So this aircraft can also operate with those kinds of aspects. So all considered is a multi-role aircraft, and enormous amount of electronics assisting it in various ways. In addition to the very mundane task of navigation and housekeeping, is specifically identified for multi-role aircraft such as the Su-35. So I had mentioned in the previous session that the concept of engineering system design for avionics has three large groupings to it. Okay, so the first one is called as the conceptual design, followed by a preliminary design, and the last one is called as the detailed design. We'll be looking at each of these aspects of avionics system design from here on. Okay, so in the case of a conceptual design, some of the important questions require to be answered. Okay, so the first of these questions is what will the particular avionics system fundamentally attempt to do? What is its role? Okay. Next one is what is the means available to actually perform such an operation in the avionics system? How will it do it? Okay, so that's the question. What is the means available? Next one is there any general arrangement for the parts? What is the sort of layout, topology, connectivity that has to be defined? The arrangement of parts. We had seen about it in the discussion on packaging. How will you integrate it in terms of the various subsections or the modules or subsystems that go into the overall avionics system design? Okay, is there any general arrangement of parts? That is the next question. After which, the end of all of this will constitute what is called as a conceptual design, and this is fundamentally performed by a design engineer. Okay, and it still remains as an engineer's concept, which is likely to be modified extensively as the concept evolves and reaches a certain level of refinement in terms of its finality. Okay, so it's like the equivalent of designing clay models for automobiles or computer-aided design models on a software basis. So that's the equivalent of it. It is still not in its practical physical form. It is in its concept form. So that is called as a conceptual design, which will try to address certain questions and end up with what is called as a conceptual design. So when the concept at some level is considered as reasonably refined enough and adequate enough, what is following this particular phase is called as the preliminary design. Okay, so wherein you have certain other questions which are asked, such as what is the typical dimensions of this particular avionics system? Is it likely to be accommodated? What is the level of complexity that is involved so that it can get accommodated within one or a few modules which are packaged as a part of the LRU or LRM definition? The concept of defining the numbers of such modules, are they uniform? Are they going to be defined in terms of the subsystems in various levels of dimensionality? All of these aspects of dimensions will be very critical at the level of the preliminary design. Okay. Followed by that, you have aspects such as the weight and the typical massive nature that is involved while it occupies the specific region of the avionics bay. Is it reasonably balanced in terms of its weight characteristics? Okay. Next is what is the amount of power that it will consume, and what is the nature of the power parameters such as the voltage utilization, the aspect of AC or DC as element associated with that power. All of this gets defined there. Another one which is also being looked at closely is the typical cost factor involved. Okay, so how much will it be in terms of monetary equivalent? So size, weight, power, and cost is an important attribute which is addressed as a SWIFE-C criterion optimization during the preliminary design phase. So every one of these questions needs to be totally covered as a efficiency definition scheme before the preliminary design is also considered as complete. So the stage that follows the preliminary design is called as the detailed design, wherein various other quite poignant and important questions will need the answers so that can now be brought into its physical form. Okay. So these include questions such as how many separate components and submodules, subsystems, and parts will be there? What will be the design specifications and aspects associated with the geometry, okay, and the shape parameters of such parts? What sort of materials have to be used? Okay, there is a difference between using commonplace silicon in semiconductors and gallium nitride, which is used nowadays in significant amount of aerospace components design. Okay, so what sort of material choices have to be made for the conductors, for the various smart components, passive components, and so on. Okay, what is the means available to fabricate it? How will it be manufactured? That also has to be addressed. How is the integration of the various components made, considering that each of them is made by a different manufacturer? How are they going to literally come together? Okay, so that integration of parts is again an aspect which will be covered as the detailed design process. An additional aspect that is also considered here is, will it be able to take care of progressive upgrades that will take place with the course of time? Okay, has it got an ability to scale upwards in order to accept and accommodate newer technologies, advancements to technologies, and what kind of a consequence will it be having on the existing design that is undergoing a current phase of development? That is again part of a design level detailed design scheme that is pursued as part of the overall avionics system design. Okay, at this point, it would be very significant to introduce the concept of standards and specifications. Okay, so when the design is complete, it will have to pass what is called as a specifications and standards test. Only after that, it will be taken into the phase of a physical concept and its ability to withstand the rigors of aerospace platforms. Okay, so when it comes to standards and specifications, so the designer of a particular avionics system needs to satisfy two important entities. The first one is the potential customer of that particular solution of avionics system. So who will principally be operating the system. Okay. So the next one is the government regulators who will now want to investigate the performance of this particular system. So these include commonplace civilian regulators identified with the various governments, such as the ones in the US, such as the FAA, Federal Aviation Authority. In India, you have the equivalent of that as the Director General for Civil Aviation, okay, DGCA. So there are various regulators all over the world for regions of geography that they are reigning supreme, and each of them constitutes the so-called government regulator. They will be investigating the particular avionics system and approving it during its design phase as suitable enough to be brought into production, okay, or into a physical form where it can be tested and rated against its originally claimed attributes or the so-called goals that we saw in an earlier slide. Okay, so these government regulators who are preceded by the customers work together in a manner where they can give a certain standardization against the specifications which have been identified for the avionics system. So in the case of military systems, there isn't any significant aspect because military avionics systems are by and large R&D intensive. So there will be a progressive improvement that takes place all the time. So in blocks, some of these avionics systems get approved in terms of the standards that they will need to maintain during the production phase. In the context of military avionics solutions, you have certain incremental developments that take place within which you have what is called as a developmental block. And within that block, a certain standard is always retained as part of the development of that particular solution. Okay. So what are the customer specifications that are primarily investigated as part of the standardization process of an avionics system? Some of the parameters include performance aspects. Okay, these go in terms of the size, weight, power, and cost factors. What is the typical performance attributes with reference to the aircraft's capabilities, such as its ability to travel a certain duration, a certain distance at a particular altitude, and against each of these parameters, the particular avionics system needs to be highly supportive. So if it were to fail in one of these aspects, clearly there is a requirement to go back and do further development and improvement in performance characteristics. Okay. Then if it's a civilian airplane, the avionics system needs to be passenger friendly. Okay. So there cannot be rather very uncertain kinds of performances that can be putting the passengers in extreme levels of uncertainty or confusion regarding operation of the avionics solution. Okay, examples of that include infotainment systems. They'll need to be reasonably straightforward in terms of their operation by even uninitiated passengers. Okay, so that is a case where passenger comfort and friendliness is completely rated. Then concepts such as its ability to work alongside various other flight instruments and the qualities of its ability to be handled by a wide cross section of pilots. Again, these are performance aspects which will also be investigated. When it comes to another aspect, excluding the performance, it has to do with what is called as the cost parameter. Okay, what is the price of the system? What is the useful life? How much of a maintenance has to be given to it? How much time is likely to be spent on the maintenance of the avionics system? And are there replacement parts that can be identified, okay, which are also cost effective? And what is the number of units which will be in demand at any given point of time? Is it a viable solution in terms of its manufacturability aspect? Okay, what options are given in terms of purchase and procurement of this particular avionics system? Typically, what is the duration of time available since the point where a demand has been placed or a requirement or request has been placed for the avionics system? When will it be delivered? So the delivery schedule has to be clearly defined. And are there possibilities to avail payment options, okay, or schedules of payment? How much has to be paid during what phase of development of that product? Okay, some of them has to be upfront, some can be paid during the operational phase of the particular avionics system, okay, including the aspect of maintenance, repair, replacement, all of it. So clearly all elements of cost have to be also projected clear in no uncertain terms before the customer evinces some level of interest in buying and deploying the particular avionics system. So performance and cost are primary elements which are of significant concern to the customers as far as specifications and standards go. So as I mentioned, specifications and standards has two broad elements to it. One is the customer side, the other one is the government regulators. Okay, now let's look at the government/military, one or the other depending on the nature of the aircraft. Regulators on the side of the government and the military, who will have their own set of specifications which the avionics solution has to pass. Okay, so the Federal Aviation Administration of the United States primarily sets certain regulations literally for the whole world, okay, because aerospace systems had its advent in the US. By and large, most of these specifications have to conform to US standards, okay. So FAA defines such regulations, and these include aspects such as the robustness of the avionics system, its ability to be identified against a very stiff LVH criterion such as noise, vibration, and harshness test, which will need to pass. The environmental aspects which also need to be negotiated, such as chemical effects, dust, presence of microorganisms, temperature cycling, the vibration test and so on. Okay, so the reliability aspect against each of this environmental factors also will be investigated thoroughly. And during various phases of operation of the aircraft, such as landing, takeoff, cruise, and its ability to perform during contingencies, such as emergency aircraft's situation or status, which it will need to negotiate so that it is able to offer adequate support even during emergency conditions that the aircraft suffers from, okay, such as a sudden case for inoperability. What are its cases, its chances to withstand those kinds of situations, okay. These are all for the civilian side. When it comes to the military side, the dangerous nature of the aspect of operation is clearly a present situation. You don't really need to question that, okay. Military aircrafts and avionic systems are always likely to be exposed to danger. So what is going to be a significant concern there is not going to be associated with the concept of danger, okay. So what will take the precedent here is its ability to actually play a dual role as a customer and a regulator. Because of the constantly evolving nature of military avionics, there isn't too much time available for disparate agencies to take into account the aspect of specifications. So the military customer as well as the regulator are one and the same, okay, and there are a separate set of military specifications called mil-spec, which the components need to completely be identified against before they are incorporated into the design. So you'll have, for example, components that are classified as useful for civilian applications, military applications, and space applications, okay. So in each of these cases, right, starting from the component level onwards, there has to be a very good understanding of the design aspect. So the military user, who is also a customer and a regulator, bundled into one, they may set minimum standards for mission turnaround time, the robustness of the design, the stability and reliability of the particular avionics system, and the various other performance aspects vis-a-vis the aircraft performance criterion, such as speed, altitude, maneuverability, and also its vulnerability to external attack modes. Okay, so how good is it in terms of its robustness to withstand attack from beyond? So that vulnerability criterion as well as its ability to remain undetected so that it can operate for extended durations of time. For example, if it's a radar system, the radar system needs to operate in a manner where the onboard aircraft radar remains undetected for a reasonable extent of time so that the aircraft can safely carry out certain of its mission specific attributes. If it is a radar guided missile system, it should not be in a manner where it shows up on the enemy radar or enemy aircraft systems. So those kinds of undetectable aspects are also emphasized as part of the avionics system design for the military user. So there is a reasonable level of disconnect in the specifications for the civilian and military standards that are being set for avionics system, and clearly from the design phase onwards, the choice of the components, the methods by which they are integrated, criterion such as SWaP-C, all differ for each of the two types of users. Okay. In the further discussions on this course, we'll be looking at crucially the aspect of integration of an avionics system. Well, once the detailed design is complete, you'll need to bring it into its physical form and put them all together in order to represent an avionics system. So we'll be looking at all such aspects from a functional perspective, which means the avionics system should be already in a manner where it is totally integrated. So we'll be looking at the discussion from that point of view in the further session for this course, which will be tomorrow. So if there are any queries related to discussions we had during today's session, this can be addressed during the remaining time that is available today. So I have a chat message here from Divya. Divya, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I hope there had been an improvement since the time you indicated that there was a lack of clarity.
Yes, sir. The voice is bit grainy today.
All right, so we are not sure along which point in the overall process of communication this has happened, because there weren't anybody else commenting in a similar manner. So let's hope that there is a reasonable clarity for a larger part of the discussions that we had today. Okay, so if you had any queries, you could certainly ask them now, because getting them clarified is very much a part of the actual day-to-day discussions on this course. So if you did find that some part of what was discussed today is not clear, maybe you can bring them up now. Yes, Divya, which section had issues as far as you were listening to today?
Sir, just that the whole quality of along the entire class was low, sir. It
All right, all right. So we'll see where it can be improved. So what I shall do is put the complete series of documents related to what we had discussed today in OneDrive, so that you can consult them and use them alongside what we had been discussing, which is in the form of a recording, again available in MS Teams, so that you can have both of them side by side while you go through the actual discussions. Okay.
okay, sir.
Yeah.